He promised me we would drive home together after the funeral. Home. Such a small word for a life built over 30 years. But somewhere between the cemetery and the city lights, the turns stopped making sense. The houses disappeared. The road narrowed. And when my son finally stopped the car, he looked at me with a stranger's eyes and said, "This is where you get out." I thought burying my husband was the worst goodbye I would ever live through. I was wrong. I used to think grief came in one color. Black like the dresses people wear to funerals. Black like the ink on death certificates and sympathy cards. Black like the suits that close caskets and carry them away. But grief, I've learned, comes in shades. There is the grief of losing a husband. And then there is the grief of realizing your son has been quietly preparing to lose you. Before the funeral, before the flowers and the folded hands and the slow-moving cars, there was a life that felt ordinary in the way you only recognize once it is gone. We were 3. My name is Elena. I was a wife for 30 years. A mother for 27. A bookkeeper in a small office above a bakery where the smell of fresh bread softened the sound of arguments about invoices and overdue accounts. Some days I felt invisible. Other days, invisibility felt like a kind of mercy. My husband, Marco, was the sort of man people liked quickly and deeply. He laughed with his whole chest, clapped shoulders, remembered birthdays, carried extra jumper cables in the trunk of his car, just in case. The world saw his warmth. I saw the shadows that sometimes crept in when he thought no one was looking. The unfinished sentences. The phone calls taken in the hallway. The locked drawer in his desk that stayed locked even when we owed more than we had. And then there was our son, Daniel. He arrived late in our marriage, a surprise wrapped in tiny socks and sleepy cries. Marco cried harder than the baby the day we brought him home. I still remember his voice, hoarse and reverent, whispering, "We have a second chance now, Lena. We are going to get everything right." We tried. God, we tried. Daniel grew up in a small apartment that smelled of garlic and coffee, above a neighbor who always played old songs too loudly and another who collected plants instead of friends. Our living room wall wore the pencil marks of his growing years. 1st grade. 3rd grade. The summer he shot up 3 centimeters in a month and complained his legs hurt. He was a bright boy. The kind who learned to read street signs before children's books, who always wanted to know how things worked. Why the postman came even in the rain. Why some people slept on benches. Why his father sometimes stared too long at the empty space where our mailbox used to be before the landlord fixed it. As a child, he loved the sound of cars. On Sunday afternoons, Marco would take him for drives. Sometimes they came back with ice cream, sometimes with stories. "We got a little lost," Marco would say, though he knew the city like the back of his hand. "But we found a shortcut." Daniel would repeat the new street names quietly to himself, as if collecting them. Those drives became their thing. I would stand at the window, dish towel in my hands, and watch them disappear down the street, a small boy in the passenger seat and a man who believed that motion meant progress. I trusted them completely. Back then, I never imagined a day would come when I would fear being in a car with my own son. Time moved the way it always does when you are busy counting small things instead of big ones. Years were measured in school report cards and rent increases. Then in college admission letters and graduation photos. Then in the way your son stops asking if he can go out and simply tells you when he will be home. We moved once. From the small apartment above the bakery to a modest house on the edge of the city. It had a narrow driveway and a patch of grass that Marco proudly called a yard. He planted a single young tree in the center, careful hands pressing soil around its roots. "For him," he said, nodding toward Daniel, who was 14 and pretending not to care. "What kind of tree is it?" I asked. Marco shrugged. "One that will outlive us, I hope." Daniel rolled his eyes, but I saw it, the quick softening of his mouth, the way he lingered at the window that week, watching the tree tremble in the wind like something that hadn't yet decided if it wanted to belong. Our life was not glamorous. We had no summer houses, no business class flights. We had a second-hand couch, a television that sometimes flickered, a kitchen table sanded smooth by years of elbows and homework and bills spread out like accusations. We had arguments. About money. About Daniel's friends. About Marco's long hours at the garage and the side work he did some evenings. He called it favors. Called it risk. Men would come by the house sometimes, heavy gold chains around their necks, cologne that arrived before they did. They would stand just outside the doorway, voices low. When I appeared, Marco would laugh too loudly and say, all good, all good. Just talking. About what? I asked more than once. About cars, Elena. Always cars. But there were times when he came to bed smelling more of fear than motor oil. Those nights I lay awake, counting the quiet between his breaths, as if I could keep him safe through arithmetic. Daniel saw more than we realized. Children always do. At 17, his questions sharpened. Why do you let them treat him like that? He demanded once after a man named Rico left, his laughter echoing down the hallway. Like what? I asked, though I had seen it too, the slap on the back that landed too hard, the way Marco's shoulders rounded. Like they own him, Daniel said. Like he owes them more than they owe him. He is just doing some extra work, I said, clinging to the words like flotation devices. Daniel frowned. For who though? I didn't know. Or maybe I did and just didn't want to see the shape of it. That was the first time I saw something else in my son's eyes. Not just worry. Not just adolescent anger. Something harder. A resolve that had not come from me. Promise me you will not get involved, I said, my voice thinner than I wanted it to be. He looked at me for a long moment. I promise I will get us out, he said instead. Life, like a careless editor, cut past that conversation and carried us forward. Daniel left for college on a day the sky looked undecided. I packed him bags of food he wouldn't eat and advice he pretended not to hear. Marco drove him, of course. Fathers like him lived for moments like that. The proud walk to the car, the slammed trunk, the clasped shoulders. When they returned later without Daniel, the house felt too big. Marco carried in a silence that did not match the occasion. I knew that silence. It was the same one that followed certain phone calls, certain visits. What is it? I asked. Nothing, he said, kissing my forehead. He is where he needs to be. But that night I found him in the small office, the desk drawer open, papers spread out like confessions. When he heard me, he closed the drawer too quickly. We will talk soon, he said. There are things I need to explain. Just not tonight. He never explained. The heart is a treacherous machine. It keeps secrets even from its owner until it decides it is done. 2 weeks before the funeral, he came home from work later than usual. I had set aside his dinner, foil tented over the plate, the way I always did. He kissed my cheek, slower than usual, his palm lingering a second longer on my shoulder. Long day? I asked out of habit. Long life, he replied with a tired half-smile. That night, he chest in the middle of a dream and never made it back to the surface. People say it was sudden. To me, it felt like the final period at the end of a sentence that had been running on too long. The days between his death and the funeral were a blur of casseroles and condolences. People I hadn't seen in years appeared in our doorway, wearing sympathy like a borrowed coat. They hugged too tightly, whispered too loudly, mentioned how strong I was in the past tense, as if the strength had already been spent. Some of his work friends came too. They stood at the edge of the living room, uncomfortable in their suits, looking at the family photos on the wall as if reading a language they didn't speak. One of them, a tall man with a scar along his jaw, caught my eye for half a second. There was something there, guilt perhaps, or a message he had no permission to deliver. Daniel stood beside me that night, a glass of water in his hand that he forgot to drink. People kept saying the same thing to him. You are the man of the house now. As if grief had a promotion system. He nodded each time, his jaw tight, eyes rimmed red. When the last guest left, he sank onto the couch, elbows on his knees, hands steepled over his mouth. You should sleep, I said, touching his shoulder. I am fine, he answered, the words automatic, hollow. You do not have to be fine, I replied. He looked up at me then, and for a fleeting moment, I saw my little boy again, the one who once scraped his knee and insisted he could walk without limping. Then the moment vanished, replaced by a guardedness that didn't belong to a 27-year-old. It belonged to someone much older, or someone who had seen too much. Mom, he said slowly, as if choosing each word with tweezers, things are going to change. Of course, I said, thinking of bills, paperwork, learning to sleep on only one side of the bed. We will figure it out. Together. He stared at me for a heartbeat too long. Yeah, he murmured. Together. Together. The day of the funeral was cold in that particular way where air feels heavy, like it is carrying its own grief. I dressed in the black dress I had bought for weddings. It did not feel like the same fabric. My hands shook when I buttoned the sleeves. At the cemetery, I watched the casket descend, the ropes sighing under its weight. People around me dabbed their eyes, blew their noses, shifted their feet on the damp ground. Someone began the Lord's Prayer. Another person's phone vibrated, a bright little betrayal in their pocket. Daniel stood on my left side. When the first shovel of dirt hit the lid, his shoulders flinched almost imperceptibly. I reached for his hand. For a second, his fingers tightened around mine. Then gently he pulled away. I told myself it was because he needed his hands free to shake the priest's hand, accept condolences, be the man of the house everyone kept appointing him to be. Later, as people wandered back to their cars in small clusters of shared sadness, he turned to me. "I will drive you home," he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. "Your uncle can take us," I replied automatically, nodding toward my brother, who was arguing with a parking attendant about nothing in particular. "No," Daniel insisted. "Come with me. We should talk." There it was again, that careful choosing of words. That heaviness in the spaces between them. For a moment I hesitated. The sky above the cemetery was the color of unspoken things. The wind tugged at my scarf. Somewhere a little way off I heard the gravel crunch under the weight of a car leaving. "Okay," I said at last. "We will talk." As I walked toward his car, my shoes sinking slightly into the soft earth, I told myself this was what my husband would have wanted. Mother and son facing the future together. Driving home from the graveyard of what had been, toward whatever was waiting. I did not know yet that the road my son chose that afternoon would not lead us home. It would lead me somewhere else first. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere empty. Somewhere remote enough that when he finally stopped the car, the only witnesses would be the trees, the dirt, and the echo of his father's secrets in the space between us. Grief has a way of rearranging sound. Even when the world looks the same, it speaks in a different tone. The wind no longer brushes past you. It circles, lingers, presses against your ribs like it wants to ask a question you are not ready to hear. And in the passenger seat of my son's car, on that cold drive away from my husband's fresh grave, the silence between us felt older than both of us combined. I kept my hands folded in my lap, the skin still warm from the last person who had squeezed them at the cemetery. Daniel's knuckles were tight around the steering wheel, so tight the color had drained from them. His jaw shifted every few seconds, like he was chewing words before deciding to swallow them whole. I had seen my son angry, tired, confused, but this was different. Grief had carved something sharp inside him, or maybe it had revealed something that had been waiting. We passed the city limits quickly, so quickly I didn't notice until the houses began to thin out and the familiar intersections fell behind us like forgotten promises. Usually after the cemetery, families go home, reheat leftover casseroles, fold up borrowed chairs. But Daniel kept driving forward, not homeward. The road stretched ahead, then straightened, then curved in a direction I did not recognize. "Daniel," I said softly, testing the sound of his name in this new version of silence. "You took a different turn." "I know," he replied. His voice clipped at the edges. The air between us tightened. "Where are we going?" I asked. He exhaled sharply. "We need space to talk." Talk. That word had been circling us like a bird waiting for one of us to break. I wanted to believe I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe this detour was simply a son trying to find a quiet moment with his mother after saying goodbye to his father. But the way he avoided my eyes, that wasn't the avoidance of sadness. That was the avoidance of a truth. The road grew narrower. Pines crowded the shoulders. Somewhere behind us, the world we knew shrank into a memory. "Daniel," I said again, "if this is about the bills or the house or the paperwork." "It's not," he cut in. A car passed in the opposite direction, its headlights flashing briefly across his face. In that split-second illumination I saw it clearly, the torment, the decision, the shadow of something he had been carrying for too long. "What did your father tell you?" I whispered. His fingers twitched against the steering wheel. There it was. The truth had a name now, and it was not mine. When you share a life with someone for decades, You learn to interpret the smallest change, the way their shoulders lift when they lie, or the way they pause before answering a question you didn't even know was dangerous. Marco had been hiding something long before death took him. I felt it in the way he lingered at the door before leaving for work, in the nights when sleep refused him, in the way he looked at Daniel sometimes with caution instead of pride. But I did not know it had reached our son. I did not know secrets like illnesses could be inherited. "Mom," Daniel said, his voice almost breaking on the word. "Please don't make this harder." The trees thickened outside, standing like tall, silent witnesses. Gravel crackled beneath the tires. The asphalt had ended without my noticing. For a moment the world around us felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by the things we never said when we had the chance. "Daniel," I said calmly, "your father told you something before he died." His shoulders went rigid. He blinked hard. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't ask about him right now. Don't ask about him right now." But that was the moment I knew. The funeral had ended, but something else was about to begin. Something that had been building from the inside out, collecting in the corners of conversations, hiding behind the warmth of our family dinners. It pressed against us now from all sides, demanding to be acknowledged. The car jerked slightly as he shifted gears. The road dipped. A curve appeared, blind and narrow, like a question with no mercy for the one answering it. "I didn't ask for this," Daniel murmured almost to himself. "What didn't you ask for?" He didn't answer. He swallowed, his throat working like he was trying to force something down, a truth, a fear, a memory. "You don't understand," he said after a long silence. "You never understood what was happening. You just kept living like everything was fine." My pulse thudded in my ears. What was happening, Daniel? His nostrils flared. His grip tightened again. "I can't do this," he said under his breath. The road ahead opened into a clearing, a long strip of dirt carved between two slopes of trees. The kind of place hikers used to stop for rest, or hunters used to park their trucks in the early mornings. A place without witnesses, without houses, without the safety of being seen. Daniel slowed the car. My stomach dropped. He pulled to the side and put the car in park, the engine's idle rumble filling the quiet with a trembling heartbeat. He let his hands fall into his lap, fingers curling inward like they were hiding from the truth too. For the first time since the cemetery, he looked at me directly, and in his eyes I saw it. Fear, guilt, and something else, resignation. "Mom," he said softly, "please just listen." The wind pressed against the windows, whispering through the trees as if urging him to go on. But he didn't. Instead, he reached for the door handle. "Daniel." My voice caught. "Where are we?" He opened his door. A gust of cold air rushed in. He stepped out, boots crunching on gravel, then walked around to my side. Each step sounded like the ticking of a clock winding down on something I had taken for granted, the belief that my son would never become a stranger to me. He opened my door. The air outside smelled of pine, cold dirt, and endings. He didn't help me out of the car. He didn't even meet my eyes. He just stood there, jaw tight, shoulders trembling, caught between duty and dread. "This," he said quietly, as if rehearsing a sentence someone else had taught him, "is where you get off." The world did not tilt. It did not darken. It simply shifted, the way a foundation shifts when a house begins to crack. I felt something inside me fracture with the smallest sound, not loud enough for him to hear, but loud enough that I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The engine hummed behind me. The wind circled us. The trees bent slightly, waiting. And my son, my only child, stood in front of me with a truth he wasn't ready to tell and a secret he was no longer able to carry. Everything familiar fell away in that moment, and I stepped into a silence that was no longer mine. The wind moved around us like it had been waiting for this moment, like it knew what was coming long before I stepped out of the car. Daniel stood there, not quite facing me, not quite turning away either. His breath came out in short, uneven threads. Mine found no rhythm at all. When the ground shifts beneath your feet, you don't fall immediately. You hover in the moment before the fall, suspended between what you thought you knew and what is about to destroy it. "Daniel," I whispered, "look at me." He didn't. His eyes stayed fixed on a point somewhere over my shoulder, a cluster of pine needles trembling against the gray sky, or maybe nothing at all. Sometimes people avoid your gaze not because they are hiding something, but because they are afraid that one look will make them confess everything. "I'm sorry," he murmured. 2 words, and they didn't belong to a son abandoning his mother. They belonged to someone carrying a burden too heavy for his age, too heavy even for his posture, which sagged slightly like a beam beginning to bow under the weight of a house. "Sorry for what?" I asked, forcing calm into my voice, even as my fingers curled around the edge of the car door. He exhaled shakily. The sound traveled through the quiet like a thin crack across glass. "You don't understand," he said again, the same words from the car, but softer now, frayed. "Then help me," I whispered. "Help me understand." His jaw worked as if he were chewing on a truth with sharp edges. "I can't," he said. "I shouldn't have brought you here. But I couldn't take you home. Not yet." "Why not?" He flinched, not visibly, not dramatically, just a tiny flicker near the eyelids, the kind only a mother would notice. "Because it's not safe," he said. The words didn't fit the man standing in front of me, the man built from my husband's shoulders and my eyes. They didn't match the coldness you'd expect from someone abandoning their mother. Instead, they held something far more complicated: fear, urgency, and a kind of painful protectiveness. "Daniel," I said slowly, "did someone threaten you?" He closed his eyes, only for a heartbeat, but in that moment the truth slipped through. Whatever this was, it had been building long before the funeral. "You should go back," he said. "Go back where it's safe. I'll handle the rest." "What rest?" I demanded, voice trembling but steady. He stepped back, as if distance could save us from the conversation he didn't want to have. "I shouldn't say anything. Daniel." "I promised him," he said suddenly. The world froze. Promised him. The word hit me harder than the cold wind. Harder than grief. Harder than the drive itself. "What did you promise your father?" I asked, barely. He wrapped his arms around himself like he was bracing against something that had already hit him. "Just," he swallowed. "Just that I would protect you." My chest tightened. "Protect me from what?" He didn't answer. "He made you promise something?" I pressed. Daniel nodded, barely. "When?" His voice cracked. "The night he died." A quiet gasp escaped me. Not because of the timing. I had suspected Marco's last night held truths he never gave me, but because of the look on Daniel's face. A son reliving a memory he wanted to forget. "What did he say?" I whispered. Daniel's breath hitched. Not a tear, not a sob, a single fragile breath that gave him away. "He told me they would come. That things were already in motion. That there wasn't time to explain everything." He closed his eyes. He said he'd made mistakes. Mistakes. The word twisted inside me. Marco had been hiding something. I felt it in every unexplained absence, in the men who came to our door with heavy watches and heavier silences, in the way he had stared at Daniel before college with a regret that made no sense at the time. "What kind of mistakes?" I whispered. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. His father's gesture, inherited without permission. "He wouldn't tell me." "And you believed him?" He finally met my eyes. "Mom," he said softly, painfully, "you didn't know him the way I did. Not at the end." He blinked hard. He was scared. Scared. Marco, loud, warm, fearless Marco, scared. What was he afraid of? I asked. Daniel shook his head. "I don't know. He never said who they were. Only that they'd come looking. And that when they did, they'd go through you to get to something he left behind." My breath caught. Left behind? Left behind where? He hesitated too long. A hesitation filled with knowledge, not comfort. "What did he give you?" He took a step back, boots crunching on gravel. "It's better if you don't know." "No," I said louder than I meant to. "No more secrets. Tell me." His voice dropped to a trembling whisper. "He left me something important. Something people would do anything to take. Something that can't end up in the wrong hands." My pulse raced. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying his words into the branches as if they were warnings. "What is it, Daniel?" He squeezed his eyes shut. "A key," he said finally. "A key." My voice felt stolen from me. "A key to what?" He didn't answer. Instead, he whispered, "I shouldn't have brought you here. You shouldn't have left me here." I shot back, the pain sharper now, tinged with confusion. He shook his head. "This isn't about leaving you. It's about keeping them away from you." Dad said they'd watch the house. That the moment he was gone, they'd come looking. I needed to get you out before they did. My skin prickled. Daniel, what have you gotten yourself into? His breath came out ragged. I'm trying to fix it, he said. I'm trying to fix what he couldn't. And abandoning me helps you fix it? His voice cracked open completely. It keeps you alive. My heart slammed against my ribs. Alive. Alive. The cold road. The empty trees. The trembling in his hands. The key. The promise. Daniel. I have to go, he whispered. No. He took another step back, then another, as if distance was the only thing that could keep me safe. I'll come back for you, he said. Just stay here. Please. Don't go home. The wind howled through the clearing, warning, taunting, pleading. He climbed back into the car, closing the door with a soft but final thud. Daniel! I shouted, stepping forward. The engine roared to life. He rolled down the window, leaving me on a remote road with nothing but cold air, a racing heart, and a truth that felt too big for the silence that followed. My husband's secrets were not buried with him. They were walking toward me now, and I was alone. The moment Daniel's car disappeared around the bend, the silence closed in like a door being gently, but firmly shut. The forest swallowed the sound of his engine until there was nothing left but the wind threading itself through branches overhead. I stood there, motionless, breath snagged in my chest, the cold biting through my coat like it had been invited. There are different kinds of abandonment. The kind you expect, the kind you earn, and the kind that arrives like a slap from someone who once held your face gently in their palms. This one felt like all three, and none of them. The dirt beneath my shoes was soft from last night's rain. Pine needles covered the ground in a blanket that looked almost peaceful if you didn't know the reason you'd been left standing on it. I wrapped my arms around myself and stared at the empty curve of road where Daniel had vanished moments earlier. A key. Promise. A danger unnamed. The words repeated themselves, unsettling and unfinished. Why would Marco, a man who once forgot where he put his reading glasses for 3 days, give our son something that could put us both in danger? And why hide it from me, the woman who held every secret of his childhood, every sorrow of his adulthood? I turned slowly, scanning the clearing. A distant crow called out, its cry echoing through the trees like a warning. The sky was beginning to shift, a faint bruise of storm clouds gathering on the horizon. I felt the cold sharpen. This was not a place meant for hesitation. But even as fear clawed at my throat, something else stirred beneath it, the first fragile thread of anger. Daniel thought he was protecting me. But protection doesn't come in the shape of abandonment. Protection doesn't drop a mother in the middle of nowhere and drive away with the truth buckled into the passenger seat. Truth buckled into the passenger seat. Damn it, Marco, I whispered into the wind. What did you do? The forest offered no answer, only the rustle of branches and the distant shiver of something moving deeper in the woods. I stepped back instinctively. Every horror I'd ever imagined, every shadowy figure, every whispered threat, stretched long in my mind. But fear is a strange companion. Once it arrives, it keeps you tethered to the present. It forces you to breathe, to listen, to decide what to do next. And standing still was the one thing I knew I could not do. I reached into my coat pocket for my phone. The screen lit up, bright against the dimming sky. No signal. No bars. Just an empty little icon mocking me. I let out a slow, shaky breath. This road was more remote than I'd realized. Or maybe that was the point. Daniel hadn't chosen this place at random. A gust of wind swept my hair across my face, whipping strands around like frantic little warnings. My mind raced back to Marco's final weeks. The tension in his jaw. His sudden protectiveness over our locked desk drawer. The nights he sat on the edge of the bed long after he thought I was asleep, whispering something I never fully heard. Please, he murmured once. Not him, not her. I thought it was a dream. I felt foolish now for believing any part of our life had been untouched by the weight of whatever he was carrying. I looked back at the empty road. Daniel would not return quickly. He had been sincere in that haunted way that made the truth more terrifying. He believed danger was coming for me. And if he was right, staying in one spot made me a stationary target. The forest pressed in on both sides. Behind me, the land fell into darker shadows. Ahead, the road stretched out, curving into uncertainty. There was no sign of life, No distant hum of a town, no passing cars. I began to walk. My steps were slow at first, the way you walk through a dream when you're trying to remember if your feet still know how to carry you. But grief and shock have strange endurance. The body moves even when the mind sits stunned, hands limp in its lap. The cold deepened. The wind shifted again, this time carrying a scent that made my breath catch smoke. Not strong, not choking, just a faint ribbon of burnt wood drifting somewhere in the distance. Someone was out there. Cabin maybe. A campsite. A person who might have a phone or at least the kindness to drive me somewhere safer. I followed the scent. Branches cracked underfoot. My heartbeat grew louder, more insistent. Each shadow between the trees looked like a warning from a past I hadn't yet uncovered. After several minutes, I reached a small rise in the terrain and saw it. A plume of smoke curling gently upward from beyond the next cluster of trees. My lungs loosened with relief. But the relief didn't last. As I stepped closer, I noticed something else, tire tracks. Fresh ones. The imprint of tread marks cutting across the dirt, leading toward the smoke. And next to them, faint footprints. 2 sets. One heavier. One lighter. My breath faltered. The colder track, the lighter footfall, it was smaller, narrower. A woman's shoe, perhaps. Or a child's. The forest held its breath with me. I followed the tracks, pulse pounding now, sharp and quick. The smoke thickened, the scent of burning pine stronger. I rounded a bend formed by the slope of the land and saw the outline of a small structure between the trees. A cabin. Old. Weathered. Its single window flickering with firelight. I hesitated. Not because I feared the fire, but because of the voices. Soft. Low. 2 of them. One rough, older, heavy with a familiarity that brushed the edges of memory. The other quiet, tremulous, trembling at the ends of words like someone afraid to speak too loudly. I stepped closer, crouching near the base of a leaning spruce tree. The voices grew clearer, drifting out from the cabin's slightly ajar door. "She'll find out," the rougher voice said. A pause. "She already knows something," the quieter one whispered. My heart slammed. I froze. The rough voice growled softly. The old man didn't keep his mouth shut. And now the boy. He's involved. The boy. Daniel. I leaned forward, breath thin. "What about the wife?" the quieter voice asked. A heartbeat of silence followed. Then, "She won't make it home." Everything inside me went still. The fire popped inside the cabin, a small crackle swallowed by the forest. I sank lower behind the tree, pressing my palm against the cold bark. My mind didn't race, it sharpened, like metal learning its own purpose. This wasn't grief anymore. This wasn't fear. This was war. The kind that starts with secrets and ends with a choice you cannot unmake. The wind rose again, carrying their voices into the night, carrying my heartbeat faster than my footsteps as a single truth settled inside me. Daniel was right. And whatever Marco left behind, whatever key my son now held, had just turned me into someone else entirely. A target. There are moments when the world does not break loudly. It fractures with a whisper, a breath, a sentence spoken by men who believe you will never hear them. As I crouched behind that leaning spruce tree, their voices drifting through the cold air, I felt the shift inside me. The kind of shift that happens when survival stops being a distant idea and becomes a pulse moving through your bones. "She won't make it home." The words repeated themselves in my head, each time colder, harder, sharper. Not because of their meaning, but because of their certainty. These men weren't planning a threat. They were confirming a decision, a consequence, a fate they believed already in motion. My breath, but not from panic. Panic rises. This was something else entirely. Rage settling low, steady, controlled. It warmed me more than the coat around my shoulders. Women who have buried husbands and raised sons learn a particular kind of composure. Grief teaches you how to sit with fear without letting it own you. The rough voice spoke again, closer to the doorway now. "The boy took it. We know that much." My nails dug into the bark of the tree. The key. The secret. The burden my husband handed our son in the dark, on the night death waited just outside the door. "You think he gave it to her?" the quieter voice asked. "No," the first voice grunted. "He wouldn't trust her with something like that." The words stung, not because they doubted me, but because they believed Marco had doubted me too. They spoke with the confidence of men who thought they understood the dynamics of our marriage better than I ever did. A cold truth crept into me. Marco had been hiding more than fear. He had been hiding me. From the truth, from the danger, from the people who were now speaking of me as if I were already gone. A floorboard creaked inside the cabin. Someone shifted their weight. Shadows flickered against the wall from the firelight, their elongated forms sliding like restless thoughts. "What if she's out there already?" the second voice whispered. "What if she heard something?" The rough voice chuckled, low and dismissive. "She's a grieving widow. She won't last an hour out here." I felt something inside me harden. They did not know me. The fire popped again, a spark falling onto the dirt floor. One of the men stomped it out. The door opened a fraction more, hinges complaining softly. Boots stepped outside. I drew back behind the tree, breath caught in my throat as a silhouette emerged. Tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who filled doorways not because of size alone, but because of the weight he carried, authority, arrogance, violence wrapped in casual posture. He scanned the woods. Instinct drove me lower, my body aligning with the shape of the land. Years of being a mother meant I'd learned how to make myself small, invisible, silent when I had to. But this wasn't the silence of restraint, it was the silence of strategy. His gaze swept past me, pausing on the darkened trees, the narrowing path, the stretch of sky turning more dangerous by the second. Another step. Then another. He was close enough now that I could smell the smoke clinging to his coat, the metallic hint of something sharper beneath it. A weapon, maybe. What if the boy hid it in the house? The other man called from inside. The man outside grunted. The house will be watched. She'll go back eventually. They always do. A strange calm moved through me. No, I thought. Not this time. Not this widow. Not this mother. The man's boots shifted again. For a moment I thought he might walk deeper into the trees toward me. But he didn't. He stepped back, spat into the dirt, and returned inside the cabin. The door closed. The lock clicked. The wind rose again, pushing against my back as if urging me away. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Then I moved. Slow at first, then quicker, keeping to the edge of the trees where the ground dipped and shadows merged. Each step was a decision. Each breath a battle plan. The clearing faded behind me, swallowed by the forest. But their words followed, etching themselves into me. She won't make it home. The forest darkened as clouds gathered overhead, thick and heavy. A storm was building, not unlike the one inside me. I pushed deeper into the woods, following the incline downhill. My pulse matched the rhythm of the falling branches. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, a low echo that felt like a warning from the earth itself. Everything suddenly felt connected. The key, the fear, the secrecy, the men who believed my life was a necessary sacrifice to uncover what Marco left behind. As the first drop of rain touched my cheek, I understood something with absolute clarity. Daniel did not abandon me. He hid me, using the only method fear had taught him. And yet, by leaving me alone on that road, he forced me into the very past Marco had tried to protect me from. Into the secrets he buried for years. Into the danger both men believed I could not survive. Foot by foot, the rain grew heavier. It pattered against the leaves, drummed on my shoulders, soaked the ends of my sleeves. But I kept moving, my breath steady, my resolve sharpening. If Marco hid something powerful enough that men would hunt his widow. If Daniel carried it without fully understanding why. If both of them believed I was too fragile to bear the truth. They were wrong. A branch snapped behind me. I froze. The rain muffled the forest, but not enough. Footsteps, faint but deliberate, pressed into the wet earth. Not beasts. Not wind. Too measured, too heavy. Someone was following. Two shadows appeared between the trees, distant but closing in. My pulse surged. This was no longer a question of fear. It was a question of time. I pushed forward faster now, heart hammering, breath quickening, knowing that the next steps I took would determine not just my survival, but the unraveling of the secret Marco died protecting. The forest thickened ahead. Lightning split the sky. The ground trembled. And somewhere behind me, one of the men called out into the storm, his voice slicing through the rain. Check the trees. She couldn't have gone far. But he was wrong. I wasn't running aimlessly. I was running toward the truth. Night has a way of revealing the true shape of fear. As the storm thickened above the trees, every sound sharpened. The crack of branches, the thud of boots somewhere behind me, the wind weaving itself through the forest like a low, urgent warning. Rain soaked through my coat until it clung to my skin, cold enough to make my teeth chatter. But fear kept my body warm. And purpose kept it moving. I didn't know this forest, but I knew the feeling of running from something you don't yet understand. For years I'd run without realizing it. From the quiet changes in Marco's eyes, from the late-night calls, from the conversations that ended when I entered the room. Now those shadows had names, voices, footsteps, and the intention to erase me. A flash of lightning tore across the sky, illuminating the slope ahead of me. The ground dipped into a ravine, dense with ferns and heavy branches that formed a natural tunnel. I crouched low and slipped into it, my breath loud in my ears. Mud clung to my shoes, sucking at the soles like hands trying to pull me back. Behind me, the men's voices rose again. "She's close." One of them shouted over the thunder. Close. The word struck something deeper than fear. It struck memory. Years ago, Marco and I had taken Daniel camping in a forest, not unlike this one. A storm rolled in that afternoon, and Daniel had gotten separated from us while chasing a firefly. We found him near a creek, shaking and terrified. That night, as he slept between us, Marco whispered, "Fear finds you fast when you're alone in the woods." Back then, his words were meant to comfort me. Now they followed me like prophecy. I reached the end of the ravine and paused. Two paths branched ahead, one steep and rocky, climbing toward an outcrop, the other sloping downward into thicker trees. Lightning lit the upper ridge. A silhouette was visible. One of the men was scanning the forest with a beam of light. If I went up, he would see me. If I went down, the trees might hide me. I chose the dark. The slope was slick beneath my boots. I grabbed onto roots and trunks, lowering myself slowly to avoid making noise. Rain fell in sheets, each drop striking leaves with relentless insistence. The forest floor glistened under the lightning, a silver sheen over earth and stone. Then, a sound I hadn't expected. Water. A steady rush, faint at first, then stronger as I approached. A stream. Streams mean direction. They mean movement. They mean a path that even fear cannot erase. The water shimmered as I reached the bank. It flowed fast from the storm, swollen and cold, weaving through rocks with a low, insistent growl. I crouched beside it, catching my breath. My heart thrummed, not from running, but from the weight of everything I hadn't allowed myself to think yet. Marco had known this day would come. Daniel had known it too. But I had walked into it blind. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking droplets from the leaves in a sudden cascade. The forest came alive with motion and sound. My hair hung heavy, rain dripping from the ends onto trembling fingers. For a moment, I wanted to collapse into the mud and weep, not because I felt weak, but because reality was shifting too fast for my heart to keep up. My husband's last words had been given to our son, not to me. My son had driven me into danger to keep me alive. Strangers now hunted me for something I didn't know existed. I pressed my palms against the cold earth. "Marco," I whispered into the storm, "why didn't you trust me with the truth?" The forest swallowed the question. Footsteps emerged again, closer, louder, splashing in the mud at the top of the slope. "Check the water," a voice barked. My pulse jumped. They were right above me. I slipped off the bank, crouching low beneath an overhang where the roots of a fallen tree arched out like the ribs of a sheltering beast. The stream pressed against my boots, icy enough to numb my toes instantly. Rain soaked the back of my neck as I leaned forward, peering through the tangled roots. A flashlight beam cut across the slope. Tracks go this way, the rough voice said. "She can't see well in the dark," the quieter man replied. "She'll follow the sound." I held my breath. The beam moved dangerously close, illuminating a patch of wet leaves just feet from my hiding place. "She couldn't have gone far," the man muttered. "Far? No, but far enough." Their steps descended the slope. I closed my eyes. My breath slowed. My heart steadied. Fear remained, but something else rose with it. A fierce clarity that grief had been too heavy to reveal. These men didn't just want the key. They wanted silence. They wanted a past erased. They wanted a truth buried deeper than my husband's body. And if Marco had died protecting it, What was I willing to do? One of the men stopped, his boots inches from the edge of the stream. We should split up, he said. She's desperate. Desperate people make noise eventually. His partner nodded. Their shadows elongated in the shifting light, stretching long over the water. The rough voice continued. The boy will lead us to it. But the wife, she's too close to him. She knows enough to ruin everything if she figures it out. The wife. I wasn't Elena anymore to them. I wasn't a mother. I wasn't a widow. I was an obstacle. One worth removing. Lightning struck again, violently illuminating their faces in white fire for a single, horrifying moment. I knew the older one. Recognition hit me like a blow. Not from the cabin. Not from tonight. From years ago. He had come to the house one evening when Daniel was 12. His hair was shorter then, his clothes less worn, but the swagger in his shoulders, the danger in his eyes, had been unmistakable. Marco had stepped outside to speak with him, closing the door behind them. When he returned, his smile had been brittle, forced, heavy with something he wouldn't name. Another secret. Another beginning of a lie. Flashlight off. Move, he said. We don't have all night. And with that they disappeared deeper into the forest, heading downstream. I remained crouched beneath the roots, waiting until the crackle of branches faded. Only then did my breath escape, shaky and long. My knees trembled from the cold. My fingers stiffened. But my mind, sharper now than it had ever been, began to stitch together the fragments of a truth I had never been allowed to see. Marco's fear. The sudden money that didn't match his hours. The men who came to the door. The hushed conversations. The key he entrusted to our son. The danger that followed his death. Whatever my husband had been part of, it hadn't ended with the funeral. Began with it. Thunder boomed again. The storm intensified. The stream surged against my boots. I pushed myself upright. I wasn't going home. I wasn't returning to the road. I wasn't waiting to be found. I was following the water. Downstream meant distance. Distance meant time. Time meant survival. And if Daniel was somewhere ahead, holding the key to everything, I would find him. Because whatever truth Marco had died for, whatever legacy he had left in our son's shaking hands, I was done being the last to know. I stepped into the water, letting it guide me. And for the first time since the funeral, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt awakened. The stream pulled at my ankles as if urging me onward, guiding me with a force that felt almost intentional. The rain had swollen it into a restless silver ribbon, rushing toward something unseen. I followed it, breath steady, heartbeat aligned with the rhythm of the water. Cold numbed my legs, but clarity warmed my spine. Fear had stopped being a cage. Now it was a compass. Branches brushed against my coat. Roots reached across the mud like old veins, mapping the forest's ancient wounds. The storm roared above, but beneath it, a deeper quiet took shape, the quiet of a truth approaching, of secrets loosening their grip on the dark. For the first time since Daniel left me on that remote road, I no longer felt like someone being hunted. I felt like someone moving toward the center of a story that had been written around me without my permission. The further I followed the stream, the more the forest began to change. The ground dipped into softer earth. The trees grew wider, older, their trunks thick with moss and history. Lightning flickered through the canopy, revealing flashes of the landscape, a fallen log draped in ivy, a cluster of stones arranged in a way that didn't look accidental, a rusted piece of metal half buried in mud like an artifact the earth had tried to forget. Then a sound. Not thunder. Not rain. Not footsteps. A human sound. A gasp, sharp, startled, carried by the wind. I froze, pulse quickening. Voices followed. One familiar. One not. Stay where you are. Someone warned, voice tight with fear. Daniel. Even drenched and trembling, my body recognized the tremor in his tone. I crouched low, moving slowly through a thicket of wet leaves. The stream bent around a curve ahead, and beyond it, the land opened into a small clearing. Moonlight finally broke through a tear in the storm clouds, illuminating the scene in a pale, ghostly wash. Daniel stood near the center of the clearing. His hair was soaked, plastered against his forehead. Mud streaked his jeans. His chest rose and fell in uneven breaths. He looked younger than he had at the funeral, not because fear had aged him backward, but because he had stepped fully into the burden Marco handed him. Across from him stood a woman. She was no older than 30, her clothes drenched, her hands trembling as she held something wrapped in a thin cloth. Something she clutched against her chest like it was both sacred and terrifying. Her face was streaked with rain and tears. Her voice cracked as she repeated herself. "Stay back, Daniel. I don't want to hurt you." I leaned closer, hiding behind a wide oak trunk. "Who was she?" Daniel raised his hand slowly. "I'm not here to take anything from you. I swear. I just want answers." "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. Lightning flashed again, revealing the outline of her eyes, swollen from crying, ringed with desperation. The cloth she held bulged slightly at its center, shaped like nothing I recognized. Daniel took a step forward. "My father died for this." She flinched at the word father. "And mine," she said quietly. My breath caught. Father. The woods, the danger, the hidden key, all of it tightened into a new shape. "Your father," Daniel repeated. The woman nodded, tears lost in the rain. "He was involved with yours. Before everything fell apart." Daniel's shoulders stiffened. "Then help me understand," he said. "What is this? Why are people hunting my mother? Why did my dad keep us in the dark?" The woman hugged the cloth closer. "Because he was trying to save you." Daniel shook his head. "From what? From who?" She pointed toward the forest with a trembling hand. "From the same men who killed him." The storm paused. Even the rain seemed to hesitate midair. Killed. The word hit me like a blow to the ribs. For weeks, months, I had believed Marco's death was sudden, cruel, unexpected but natural. A heart giving out under the weight of too much life. Now it cracked open into something far more treacherous. Daniel's voice shook. "My dad didn't die of a heart attack?" The woman shook her head slowly. "He was poisoned," she whispered. The forest swallowed the confession whole. I pressed a hand to my mouth, knees weak, breath shallow. Grief rearranged itself inside me. Rising, not poisoned. Killed. Taken from us not by fate but by intent. And Daniel, my son, had known something was wrong. He carried that truth like a weight he didn't know how to set down. Marco had died in his arms, or near enough to it, whispering warnings and promises and burdens into the dark. "My father trusted yours," the woman continued. "He trusted him with something important. Something they were building together. Something dangerous enough that the wrong people wanted it destroyed." Daniel swallowed hard. "What is it?" She unwrapped the cloth slightly. Inside was a metal object, tarnished, intricate, shaped like a piece of a larger machine. A small, cold fragment that glinted under the thin moonlight like an accusation. "This," she said, voice trembling, "is one half of what your father hid." Daniel stared at it, breath trembling. "My dad gave me a key," he said. "A key to something." The woman nodded. "To the other half." Silence wrapped around them, heavy, electric. "What is it?" Daniel whispered. The woman closed her eyes. "A ledger," she said. "A record of everything, names, dates, transactions. Proof of who stole money, who laundered it, who killed the men who wouldn't cooperate." She lifted the metal piece. "This device stores it. And the key your father gave you opens it." Daniel stepped back, stunned. "They would kill for this," she said. "They already have." A branch snapped in the distance. All three of us froze. "They're here," she whispered. Daniel reached for her arm. "We have to move." She nodded, clutching the device. A second branch snapped. Heavy boots crushing wet leaves. Daniel turned toward the sound, and for a moment our eyes found each other through the trees. His widened, recognition hitting him like a wave. "Mom," he whispered. I stepped out from behind the trunk, heart pounding, soaked than I had ever been. The woman gasped. "You can't be here." "I am," I said, breath steady. "And I'm not leaving." Thunder cracked above. Another branch snapped closer. Daniel hurried toward me, gripping my shoulders. "Mom, you shouldn't have followed." I touched his cheek. I followed the truth. A shadow emerged between the trees behind him. "Run," the woman whispered. But Daniel and I didn't move. We stood there together, for the first time in days, united in a danger we finally shared. The shadows thickened. Lightning tore open the sky. And the men hunting us stepped into the clearing. No more secrets between us, no more illusions left to hide in. The storm had come full circle. and the truth was finally within reach. The clearing pulsed with danger as the shadows stepped fully into view. Rain sheeted down their coats, lightning glinted across the metal buckles of their belts, and the cold certainty in their eyes told me everything I needed to know. These men had already decided how the night would end. For them this wasn't chaos. This was cleanup. Daniel shifted instinctively, placing himself half a step in front of me. The woman clutched the wrap device tighter, her breath sharp and ragged as she backed toward the stream. I could feel every heartbeat in my chest, each one an echo of Marco's last warning, each one a reminder that grief had sharpened into something with teeth. One of the men, the older one with the scar, stepped forward first. "Well," he said, voice gravel scraped across stone. "Looks like we found our missing widow." His companion smirked, eyes gliding over me the way a butcher examines a cut of meat. I didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't give them the satisfaction of fear. The scarred man tilted his head. "Your husband made things complicated. You don't have to." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Stay away from her." "Or what?" the man asked, amused. "You'll do what your father couldn't?" It slithered through the rain. Daniel lunged, but I caught his arm. "Don't," I whispered. "Not like this." He froze, chest heaving, eyes locked on the man who had just insulted the father he barely had time to mourn. The scarred man turned his attention back to me. "He didn't tell you anything, did he? Kept you out of the business, out of the money, out of the truth." My grip on Daniel tightened. The man chuckled low and cruel. "He always said you were better off in the dark." His words should have stung. Once they might have. But now they clarified something inside me. Marco hadn't hidden things to belittle me. He'd hidden them because the truth was lethal. And he'd been right. I hadn't been ready then. But I was ready now. "What do you want?" I asked, voice steady in a way that surprised even me. The man pointed to the wrap device in the woman's hands. "That," he said. "And whatever key your husband left behind." He was stubborn. We knew he'd give it to the boy. Men like him always cave for their sons. "And if we say no?" I asked. He smiled, a thin, vile stretch of lips. "Widows disappear all the time." Thunder cracked above us, drowning out the gasp that left the woman's mouth. Daniel stepped closer still, his body forming a barrier between me and the danger. "You're not touching her," he growled. The scarred man shrugged. "Fine. Then we'll start with you." Daniel moved before I could stop him, a surge of rage, grief, and desperation. But the younger man anticipated it, sidestepping and grabbing him by the collar. Daniel fought back, pushing, twisting, rain spraying from his hair. But the man was stronger, built from years of collecting debts, not raising children. The woman screamed. So did I. But my scream wasn't fear. It was memory, sharp, piercing, rising from the night my husband died. Marco had collapsed in our hallway, clutching his chest, gasping, Daniel whispering words I never heard. But now I saw it clearly. The fear in his eyes, the urgency, the truth slipping too quickly from his mouth. He hadn't been dying of a failing heart. He had been trying to warn us. The woman took a step closer to me. "We have to run." "No," I said, eyes locked on the men. "Running doesn't end this." Daniel grunted as the younger man forced him to his knees. The scarred man approached us, boots splashing through the mud. "You could have made this easier," he said. "Just give us the device." "That's not what you want," I said quietly. "You want the ledger, the evidence, the proof that could destroy everything you've built." His smile faltered. "Flicker. Small. But enough." "You knew?" he asked. "I know enough," I replied. "You know nothing." I stepped forward, the rain washing the mud from my shoes. "I know you killed my husband." The world stilled. Even the storm paused. The scarred man's expression tightened. Not guilt, not remorse, but irritation that I'd pieced the puzzle together. "It wasn't personal," he said. "It never is," I whispered. "That's why you men leave bodies behind, because you think none of it is personal." His jaw twitched. The woman behind me trembled, clutching the device. Daniel struggled again, fists curling in the mud. "You shouldn't talk to him," the younger man warned. "It only makes things worse." "For who?" I asked softly. Lightning ripped the sky open, illuminating all of us in a single white flash. And in that flash I saw it. The truth. Not in the men's faces, but in Daniel's. He wasn't afraid for himself. He was afraid for me. Afraid of losing me the way he'd lost Marco. Afraid that his silence, his secrets, his absence these past weeks had all led us here. Mom, he gasped, voice breaking. I'm sorry. I shook my head. Did what your father asked. But I should have told you. You were trying to protect me. And I failed, he cried out. No, I said firmly. You didn't. You led me to the truth. The scarred man sighed dramatically. Enough. Hand it over. He took a step toward the woman. I moved in front of her. He froze. Not because I frightened him, but because the way I stood, shoulders square, hands steady, gaze unwavering, reminded him of someone else. Marco. A man who had stood up to them once. A man who refused to hand over what they wanted. A man who died for that defiance. You really want to die for this? He asked. No, I said. But I won't die running from you. He lifted his hand, a signal. The younger man shoved Daniel onto the ground. The woman cried out. And I stepped into the center of the clearing, rain hitting my face in thin, fierce lines. You kill us, I said. And the ledger will surface anyway. You think Marco only trusted one person? You think he didn't plan for this? You think he didn't know exactly what you would do? The men exchanged a glance. Doubt. Real doubt. Good. I continued. My voice lowered, steady as a closing door. You're not hunting a key. You're hunting time. Because once the ledger is opened, it's over. The scarred man took a hesitant step back. You don't know what you're talking about. I know enough to know you're losing control, I said. And desperate men make sloppy mistakes. Another flicker of uncertainty. The woman behind me whispered. How did you know to say that? I didn't, I murmured. But he does. I nodded toward Daniel. He had risen again, blood on his lip, fury in his eyes, but something deeper beneath it. Resolve. The same resolve Marco had carried. The same resolve these men had feared. The woman stepped beside him. He scattered pieces of it. Sent copies to people he trusted. The men stiffened. She continued, voice stronger now. If anything happens to us tonight, files will surface. Stories will break. Accounts will open. Transfers will be exposed. And your names, I said, staring at the scarred man, will be the first ones people read. The storm roared. A branch cracked. Thunder shook the ground. And the men faltered. Just enough. Grab them, the scarred man barked. But the order wasn't sharp anymore. It was frantic. The younger man lunged toward Daniel. Daniel moved too, faster than I'd ever seen him. He knocked the man's arm aside, sending him slipping in the mud. The woman ducked behind me as I stepped forward, swinging a broken branch I'd grabbed without realizing it. It struck the younger man's shoulder. He stumbled. Daniel surged upward. The woman broke into a run. The scarred man lunged toward her, but I threw myself in front of him. He froze inches away, startled not by my strength, but by my audacity. You really think you can stop me? He hissed. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because behind him, Daniel roared and tackled the younger man into the water. They crashed together, the stream exploding upward in a spray of silver. The scarred man whirled, torn between attacking me or helping his partner. That hesitation, that single second, was the moment everything shifted. The woman reached Daniel, grabbed his arm and pulled him upright. The device glinted beneath her cloak. She shoved it into his hands. Run, she cried. Go. And for the first time since Marco died, I saw it. The next generation choosing courage over fear. Daniel grabbed my wrist. Mom now. We ran. All three of us. Through the trees. Through the mud. Through the storm. The men shouted behind us, but the forest swallowed their voices. Oat. Mud splashed up my legs. Daniel's grip tightened as he pulled me over fallen logs, around sharp turns, toward the faint outline of a hill where the trees thinned and the sky opened wider. My breath came in deep, burning gulps. My heart pounded with life, with terror, with truth finally freed from its hiding place. We climbed the hill together. At the top I turned back. The clearing was distant now. Shadows moving, men running, the storm collapsing over the forest like a closing curtain. Daniel's chest heaved. The woman trembled beside us. But we were still standing. For the first time all night, I felt something that didn't belong to fear. Hope. Not because the danger was gone, it wasn't. Not because the truth was simple, it wasn't. But because for the first time we stood on the same side of it. Out of breath, soaked, trembling, I looked at Daniel. And he looked at me with the expression he wore as a boy when he held out a broken toy and whispered, "Mom, can you fix this?" Except now the toy was our life. Our past. Our future. Our truth. And for the first time I felt strong enough to answer. The storm thinned as we reached the ridge, becoming less a roar and more a shivering breath across the treetops. But the danger didn't fade with the rain. It followed us in the shape of memories, shadows, and footsteps that echoed long after the men themselves had fallen out of sight. The forest widened into open land, a stretch of wet grass bending under the weight of the night. Daniel steadied me with one hand while gripping the wrap device with the other, its metal core pulsing like a heartbeat against the cloth. The woman, Sophia, as she finally whispered her name, led the way toward an old service road carved into the earth like a scar. Deep tire tracks ran through it, the kind made by trucks that visited places quietly, without witnesses. My legs ached, my lungs trembled, but something inside me had gone utterly still. A stillness born not of calm but of purpose. Everything born not of calm but of purpose. Everything Marco had kept from me, everything Daniel had carried alone, had converged on this night, rising from the cracks of our family like a buried truth demanding air. When we reached the road, Sophia slowed, pressing her back against a tree. "They won't follow right away," she said between shallow breaths. "Not in this part of the woods. They'd need backup. Or orders. He won't make a mistake without consulting whoever gives them their teeth." Her words hung heavy in the wet air. There was someone above them. Someone who orchestrated. Someone who had been the true shadow behind Marco's fear. Daniel wiped his face with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of mud. "We can't just run forever," he said. "We need to do something." Sophia nodded. "We need to open it. The ledger. That's the only way we stay alive." My heart kicked. "Open it? Here?" "No," she said. "Not here. Somewhere safe. Somewhere public enough that they can't just walk in and disappear us." Daniel looked at the wrapped device in his hands, the cold metal shaped into something intricate, almost ceremonial. Then he dug into his pocket and pulled out a small silver key. The one Marco had given him. The one he'd sworn to protect. It glinted despite the dark. "Dad said this unlocks it," Daniel whispered. "But he didn't tell me how." Sophia stepped closer. "That's because the ledger isn't just one file. It's two pieces. Your father built the second half. My father built the first. They split it so no one could use it alone." The truth washed over me, sharp, bewildering, cruel. Marco had been protecting more than money, more than reputation, more than himself. He had been protecting a story, one that exposed powerful men, dirty deals, decades of crime. A story that named murderers and thieves and counterfeit saviors. A story someone wanted killed for it. Daniel's voice trembled. "If we open it, everything becomes public." Sophia nodded. "That's the point. But what if it makes things worse?" "Keeping it hidden didn't save him," she whispered. The wind shifted. A flock of crows burst from a nearby tree, rising like a dark wave against the thinning clouds. Their wings cut the air in wild, frantic arcs, their cries echoing across the empty land. For a brief moment, the sky felt heavy with warning. I reached for Daniel's hand. "Your father didn't die for a secret to stay buried. He died trying to make sure the right people carried it." He looked down at our joined hands, my fingers muddy, his trembling, and in his eyes I saw a boy who once believed I could fix anything. And now he needed that belief again, not as a child, but as a man facing a world splintering beneath him. "We take it to the police," Daniel said. "The FBI. Someone." Sophia shook her head fiercely. "You don't understand. Some of those people are in the ledger. They won't protect us." The silence that followed hit harder than the storm. Daniel looked between us. "Then who do we trust?" I lifted my chin. "Ourselves," I said. The word tasted new, powerful, startling in the way only truth can be. Daniel blinked, as if the idea was too fragile to touch. "Ourselves. Yes. We release it. We choose who sees it. We choose when." I stepped closer, the wind tugging at my coat like a reminder of how far we'd come. No more running. No more hiding. Your father kept me in the dark, but you won't. We finish what he started. Sophia's eyes softened. Then we need a signal. Connection. Somewhere with power, internet, safety and crowds. Daniel scanned the road. The ranger station. I blinked. What? There's one near. Dad took me there once when we went hiking. It's close. And it stays open late during storms. Sophia nodded. Perfect. They have radios. Generators. Phones. If we upload the ledger there, it'll spread too fast to contain. A howl of wind tore past us, and with it the faint echo of footsteps far behind, a reminder that danger wasn't gone. It was simply delayed. Daniel squeezed my hand. Let's go. Before they regroup, we ran. Down the service road. Across puddles that splashed cold water up our legs. Through pockets of fog drifting low over the ground. The storm thickened again, pushing us forward with its relentless urgency. My muscles burned, my breath scraped raw, but I didn't slow. Not anymore. Not with the truth so close I could feel its weight in the air. The ranger station appeared through the darkness like a miracle, a squat building with a long roof and a light glowing dimly above the entrance. Relief nearly buckled my knees. We pushed through the door. Warmth hit us instantly, along with the smell of damp wood and old coffee. A single ranger sat at the desk, flipping through a binder. He looked up sharply as we entered. 3 drenched figures with wild eyes and mud-streaked clothes. Evening, he said slowly. Everything all right? Daniel stepped forward. We need help. Please. Now. The ranger rose from his chair, suspicion flickering across his features. What's going on? Sophia lifted the wrap device with trembling hands. We need your internet. Your radio. Anything. The ranger paused, eyes narrowing. What's in the bag? Sophia hesitated. I stepped forward. The truth, I said. Maybe it was the way I said it. Maybe it was the look in our eyes. Maybe he recognized the tone of someone standing on the edge of something irreversible. He didn't question us again. He led us to a small back room. One lined with equipment, radios humming, computer screen blinking in sleep mode. Sophia and Daniel exchanged a glance, then quickly unwrapped the device. It slid onto the desk with a metallic thud. Daniel pulled out the key. Are you ready? He asked. My heart raced. Sophia nodded. It's time. Daniel fit the key into the small indentation on the side of the device. It clicked. The screen on the device lit up. A dim, trembling glow. Then symbols. Then files. Then names. Dozens of names. Some I recognized. Some I didn't. Some that made my stomach drop. Transactions. Dates. Transfers. Kill orders. Evidence. Pages and pages of truth. Daniel's hand shook. Sophia covered her mouth. The ranger stepped back as if witnessing something holy or horrific. Or both. We upload it, Daniel said, reaching for the keyboard. A crash sounded outside. We all froze. The ranger stiffened. Rain must have. A voice thundered through the door. Open it. My blood turned to ice. They had found us. The windows rattled under fists pounding against the glass. Boots scuffed on the porch. Shadows moved against the curtains like dark waves crashing at a fragile shore. Sophia grabbed Daniel's arm. Do it now. Daniel typed furiously, hands flying, panic sharpening into precision. The door shuddered under a heavy blow. Open it now or everyone inside dies. The ranger fumbled for his radio, shouting for backup. My heart pounded. My breath came fast. But my eyes stayed fixed on my son. He pressed enter. The screen flashed. Uploading. Another blow to the door. The hinges screamed. Uploading 32%. A gunshot shattered a window. Uploading 60%. Sophia screamed. The ranger ducked. Uploading 87%. Burst inward. Uploading 100%. The ledger went live. All of it. Every name. Every crime. Every transfer. Every truth. The screen confirmed it with a single final message. Distributed. And in that moment, that breath, that heartbeat suspended between terror and triumph, the men at the door froze. Because it was done. Marco's burden. Daniel's fear. My exile on that remote road. All of it had led to this. A truth unstoppable. A truth unkillable. A truth finally free. The scarred man stepped into the room. chest heaving, rain dripping off his coat. "You don't know what you've done," he growled. I stepped in front of Daniel. "Yes," I said. "We do." His jaw worked with fury, but behind his eyes I saw something else. Defeat. Sirens cried in the distance. Headlights flashed through the trees. Backup, rangers, police, maybe more, descended on the station. The men fled. But this time running would not save them. The truth had already outrun them all. Morning broke like a wound slowly healing. Gold light seeped through the ranger station windows, warm and quiet after a night of storms and revelations. Daniel sat beside me, head resting on my shoulder, exhausted but alive. Sophia slept in a chair across from us, the empty device beside her, now nothing more than a shell that had once held the weight of a universe of secrets. Outside, officers moved back and forth, radios crackling with updates. Names were being read aloud, names that had believed themselves untouchable. The ledger spread faster than the storm that had delivered us into its heart. I watched the sunrise through the window, gentle, soft, nothing like the night we survived. And I thought of Marco, of his fear, of his mistakes, of the key he'd placed in our son's shaking hands, of the truth he died trying to save. The road Daniel left me on would stay with me forever, that stretch of dirt, that moment of betrayal that wasn't betrayal at all, only a desperate attempt to keep me alive. I leaned my head against my son's. "I always thought grief ended with funerals," I whispered to myself. But now I knew the truth. Grief ends where truth begins. And sometimes the road you're left on is the one that finally leads you home.